Hey, I'm strummerdood or Matt or whatever, I don't know. So even with the prevalence of voice talent in the industry, many developers still choose to use silent protagonists, and it's interesting to see how and why they do. Muted leads often receive the signifier blank slates. The typical line of thinking goes empty vessels offer more accessible immersion into a role, allowing the player freedom to fill in the blank spaces of a character. Perhaps the most iconic silent protagonist, Link from The Legend of Zelda, possesses the qualities of a brave adventurer who grows over time. Beyond that, his personality's up in the air. It's important to note that he talks, just that we can't hear him so as not to be distracted by the particulars of his speech. The style works for the Hylian, but the concept feels distracting in many modern games. Grand Theft Auto 3 featured a narrative ripped from classic crime films, complete with a cinematic flair and a voice cast brimming with A-listers, which in turn made Claude feel all the more lost in Liberty City's expanse. Too often, he awkwardly paces and nods through tense conversations. The character becomes a parody of gaming cliches, a simple yes man. Thankfully, Rockstar replaced Claude with Ray Liotta's fiery and manic Tommy Vercetti, and they never looked back at the silent protagonist. Well, aside from mocking it in San Andreas. Of course, not all leads necessarily need a voice. Team Ninja infamously butchered Samus Aran with the other M. Simply put, a verbose character feels stark and foreign within the quiet, reserved milieu of Metroid. The character would have been better served with the stoicism of Clint Eastwood's The Man with No Name, but absolute silence would have sufficed as well. In this regard, the silent protagonist still feels relevant in modern storytelling as an element of tone. The chosen undead of Dark Souls finds him or herself alone in the ravaged remains of Lordran, left to feed on lost souls. The designers also intuitively work the concept into the narrative and theme, as the ironically named Chosen Undead is simply one of many empty vessels, which in turn makes me feel empty and hollow inside. Silent protagonists naturally figure heavily into role-playing games, another example being the closed-mouthed Sir Douchebag from South Park: The Stick of Truth, who is a lightning rod for many satirical jokes about games. But silence is also integral to focused linear narratives such as Limbo and Braid, seeing a depressing theme here. Which brings me to the typical criticism of silent protagonists, that they lack personality. The Wind Waker certainly did well with its detailed art style, allowing for more expressive immediate emotions from Link, but with Half-Life, it can be tough to determine what sort of guy Gordon Freeman would be at a barbecue. Of course, many games struggle with personality, especially with the persona of douchebags. Grand Theft Auto 5 received criticism for casting 3 dickheads in the roles of psychopathic bank robbers. I know, right? It makes sense when you say it out loud. On the other hand, the Stanley Parable subverted such criticism by literally using the player as a silent character who communicates through the incapacitated vessel of Stanley. To show dissatisfaction with the game's ubiquitous narrator, the player can, say, murder the innocent Stanley like a dickhole. I mean, now you're just that guy at a barbecue. Stanley Parable's choices bring up a good point in regards to silent protagonists, that actions speak louder than words. Not to say mutes do decision-making better, but to be visible, they need to be making meaningful choices. Take Portal Shell, who, like the monotone AI GLaDOS, begins the game rather ordinary and plain. As GLaDOS becomes more sinister, the player, as Shell, can take peeks behind the stage's curtains before breaking out of the unhinged computer's death trap, the rat escaping the maze. The portal gun becomes an extension of the character, its imaginative use allowing Shell to resourcefully take back control of her life. Another game which uses choice to paint a lead is Dishonored. Now, Corvo can speak to characters, but the discussion trees never lead to anything consequential. Instead, Corvo finds shape in how he decides to do away with targets, be it through violence or means of pacifism. The idea extends to his mask. Originally designed to represent the face of death, the mask becomes the symbol of the enemy's fear, and in turn, it represents the player's actions. Now, I don't mean to say voiced and silent characters are interchangeable, only that vocally challenged protagonists are as much a design tool as verbose ones, and have even been used to tell their own unique stories. BioShock's Jack represents the silent yes man, taking orders from the unseen Atlas. In the vein of Half-Life, the game never takes control from the player, seemingly the perfect tabula rasa. Of course, the late game twist reveals Jack was brainwashed from the start, satirizing video gamers who immersed themselves in Jack's shoes and performed every task unquestionably. Aside from the haphazard decisions regarding little sisters, Jack isn't much more than a tool to draw the player in, which was brilliant. But by this admission, Transistor's Red is far more rounded while being just as subversive. The former singer, known as a voice to the people because of her controversial lyrics, literally loses her ability to speak. The voice imbued in her weapon attempts to tell her what to do, but it becomes clear from her actions she has her own intentions. As a silent protagonist, the player naturally views her as a blank slate, making the ending all the more painful to watch as her motivations truly diverge from the players. In both of these games, it is imperative the player think that they are the character, something more easily grasped by gamers through silent protagonists. So after looking at all these games, it seems like the blank slate idea still applies, though voice characters can be just as relatable. But silent protagonists have many other uses, and they're still a relevant design tool unique to gaming, which is pretty neat.